The most ruthless man in Chicago wasn't dying from a rival's bullet, but from a single, agonizing truth. He couldn't stomach a bite of food. He was starving in a golden cage until a heavy-set maid walked into his kitchen and served him a dish that changed everything. Gabriel Costa was wasting away. At 34, the undisputed head of the Costa syndicate controlled the Chicago underworld with an iron grip, but he had absolutely no control over his own body. From the outside, his life was a portrait of dark, untouchable power. He resided in a sprawling, $15 million penthouse on Astor Street, guarded by men who would snap a neck for $100 bill. Yet, beneath the bespoke Italian suits, Gabriel was a ghost. His affliction wasn't a disease in the traditional sense. It was severe, paranoia-induced anorexia. The stress of constant betrayals, the endless territory wars, and the sheer weight of his blood-soaked crown had manifested physically. His throat would close up. Every Michelin-starred meal placed in front of him, whether prepared by the executive chef, poached from a linea, or catered from the most exclusive private kitchens in the Gold Coast, tasted like ash and poison. Dr. Harrison Aris, a highly discreet physician to the city's elite, had given him a grim ultimatum. Find a way to eat, Gabriel, or your heart is going to stop in your sleep. He was hollowed out, his cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes sunken into dark, violet bruises. He had fired 5 private chefs in a single month. They cooked with tweezers, placing microscopic edible flowers on foams and reductions. Gabriel despised it. It felt artificial. It felt like a trap. Then came Sophia Harper. She was hired through the Wellington Agency, a high-end staffing firm that catered strictly to billionaires and politicians. When Sophia stepped out of the private elevator and into Gabriel's minimalist cold steel kitchen, she looked entirely out of place. The Costa household staff were typically invisible, sleek, and model-thin, blending into the shadows. Sophia was none of those things. Sophia was fat. She carried her weight with an unapologetic, earthy grace. She had thick arms made for kneading dough, a soft, rounded belly, and a pronounced double chin that framed a face with warm, expressive hazel eyes. She wore a pristine white chef's apron tied around her wide waist, her heavy steps echoing against the imported Brazilian hardwood floors. She didn't look like she belonged in a Mafia boss's sterile penthouse. She looked like she belonged in a bustling, fragrant family kitchen in the heart of Rome. Gabriel's underboss, Leo Martino, immediately sneered at her arrival. "The agency sent us a baker's dozen wrapped in one," Leo muttered, leaning against the marble island. Sophia didn't flinch. She simply unpacked her canvas bag, pulling out a heavy, well-worn cast-iron skillet and a wooden spoon. "Good food requires substance, Mr. Martino," she replied, her voice smooth like warm honey. "Skinny cooks don't trust butter, and if you don't trust butter, you can't trust the food." From his vantage point in the darkened hallway, Gabriel watched her. There was something intensely grounding about her physical presence. In a world full of sharp edges and lethal intentions, Sophia was entirely soft. For her first task, she was instructed to make him lunch. She ignored the expensive sous vide machines and the liquid nitrogen canisters. Instead, she went straight to the pantry. She found a jar of real San Marzano tomatoes, fresh garlic, heavy cream, and a slab of premium pancetta. The kitchen quickly filled with an aroma that Gabriel hadn't smelled since he was a young boy sitting in his grandmother's cramped apartment in Brooklyn. It was a rich, heavy, unapologetic smell of sizzling pork fat and caramelizing onions. Sophia moved around the kitchen with surprising agility for her size, tasting the sauce straight from the wooden spoon, her eyes rolling back in sheer pleasure as she adjusted the salt. She loved food. She revered it. When the plate was placed in front of Gabriel in the formal dining room, there was no artistic drizzle of balsamic glaze. It was a massive, steaming bowl of rustic rigatoni, coated in a thick, velvety ragout, dusted heavily with fresh Parmigiano Reggiano. Leo stood in the corner, his hand resting on the holster beneath his jacket. Gabriel stared at the bowl, his stomach churned with the familiar, suffocating panic. "It's laced," his paranoid mind whispered. "It's too rich. You'll choke." "Eat it while it's hot, Mr. Costa," Sophia said, wiping her plump hands on her apron. "Pasta waits for no man." Gabriel looked up, locking eyes with her. She wasn't trembling like the previous chefs. She was looking at him with genuine concern, noting his gaunt frame. To her, he wasn't a terrifying Mafia don. He was just a starving man who needed a good meal. Trembling slightly, Gabriel picked up his fork. He pierced a piece of rigatoni, the thick sauce clinging to it, and brought it to his lips. He closed his eyes, preparing for the gag reflex. It never came. The flavor exploded on his tongue, salty, savory, deeply rich, and incredibly comforting. It tasted safe. For the first time in 18 months, Gabriel swallowed without feeling like he was swallowing razor blades. He took another bite, then another. The room was dead silent, save for the clinking of Gabriel's fork against the ceramic bowl. Leo watched in stunned disbelief as the ruthless, dying boss of the Costa family cleared the entire plate, scraping the bottom for the last drop of sauce. When Gabriel finally pushed the bowl away, a faint flush of color had returned to his pale cheeks. He looked at the fat maid standing by the door. "What else can you cook, Sophia?" he asked, his voice a raspy whisper. She smiled, her cheeks dimpling. "Whatever you need to survive, boss." Within 3 weeks, the dynamic inside the Astor Street penthouse had shifted drastically. Gabriel's strict rule was established. No one was allowed to prepare his food, touch his plates, or even pour his coffee, except Sophia. The change in Gabriel was undeniable. The hollows of his cheeks began to fill out, the dark circles under his eyes faded, and the terrifying cold energy that made him the most feared man in Chicago returned with a vengeance. He was no longer a dying ghost. He was a resurrected king. And it was all because of the heavy-set woman who hummed old blues songs while she worked in his kitchen. Gabriel found himself increasingly drawn to her. He would often conduct his illicit business meetings at the dining table just to be near the kitchen, watching her through the glass partitions. He watched how her thick thighs shifted as she moved between the stove and the prep station, how the sweat beaded on her forehead, and how fiercely she protected her workspace. She was a woman of substance, taking up space in a world that constantly demanded women shrink themselves. Gabriel found it profoundly intoxicating. Her size wasn't a flaw to him. It was a symbol of abundance, of life, and of a warmth he had been entirely starved of. However, Sophia's elevated status in the household was breeding toxic resentment. Leo Martino, Gabriel's fiercely loyal but deeply suspicious underboss, hated the influence this ordinary woman had over the Don. Leo had spent years trying to control the narrative around Gabriel's weakness, and now a fat maid was the only thing keeping the boss alive. Leo felt sidelined. The tension snapped on a rainy Tuesday in late October. Gabriel was expecting a highly volatile meeting that evening with the Russian syndicate to negotiate a port treaty. Sophia, sensing the stress radiating from her boss, decided to prepare a slow-braised beef bourguignon, a dish meant to ground him. She had specially requested a delivery of prime beef stock and fresh herbs from a luxury butcher shop in the Fulton Market district. The delivery arrived just after noon. Leo himself brought the box into the kitchen, dropping it heavily onto the granite counter. "Make sure it's good today, B," Leo sneered, his dark eyes flashing with something unreadable. The boss has a big night. Can't have him getting an upset stomach. Sophia ignored his tone, untying the box. My food has never upset his stomach, Leo. You worry about the guns. I'll worry about the gravy. As Leo stalked out, Sophia began her prep. She seared the beef, the rich scent filling the air, and popped open the expensive sealed glass jar of beef stock from Fulton Market. She poured a generous amount into the sizzling pot. As the liquid hit the heat, Sophia paused. Her sense of smell was her greatest weapon, refined by years of cooking and an innate love for ingredients. Beneath the savory aroma of the roasted bones and marrow, there was an incredibly faint, sharp scent. It was metallic, almost like burnt garlic mixed with bitter almonds. Frowning, Sophia picked up a clean wooden spoon, dipped it into the simmering liquid, and brought it to her lips. She didn't swallow. She let the liquid hit her palate. Her eyes widened in sheer horror. The taste was astringent, chemical, and completely unnatural. She immediately spat the liquid into the sink, rinsing her mouth frantically with cold tap water. Her heart hammered against her thick ribs. Thallium, or maybe heavy arsenic. She had grown up reading true crime and knowing the profiles of organic poisons. Whatever this was, it was designed to mimic the flavor of savory food while delivering a lethal dose. Just then, the heavy kitchen doors swung open. Gabriel walked in, loosening his silk tie, his face tight with pre-meeting stress. "Sophia," he grunted, inhaling deeply. "I need to eat. Now. Serve whatever you have." He reached out, grabbing a piece of bread from the counter, intending to dip it straight into the simmering pot of bourguignon. "No!" Sophia shrieked. Moving with a speed that defied her heavy frame, Sophia lunged forward. She slammed her thick hip against the counter, grabbed the heavy cast-iron Dutch oven by its handles with her bare hands, and hurled the entire pot into the deep stainless steel sink. The heavy pot crashed with a deafening clang. Boiling, dark brown liquid exploded everywhere, splattering across Sophia's white apron, burning her arms and hissing against the cold metal. Gabriel froze, his hand still hovering in the air holding the bread. His eyes darkened to black, a terrifying, murderous rage instantly taking over his features. He pulled his weapon from his shoulder holster in a fraction of a second, pointing it instinctively, though he didn't aim it at her. "What the hell did you just do?" Gabriel roared, his voice shaking the glass cabinets. Sophia was panting heavily, clutching her scalded forearms, her chest heaving. She didn't cower. She looked the deadliest man in Chicago dead in the eye. "I just saved your damn life, Gabriel," she yelled back, dropping the honorifics. She pointed a shaking, plump finger at the sink. "The stock from Fulton Market. It's laced. It tastes like bitter almonds and battery acid. Someone poisoned the delivery." The kitchen fell deathly silent, save for the hissing of the ruined meat in the sink. Gabriel stared at her. He saw the red, angry burns forming on her thick arms, the result of her grabbing a boiling pot bare-handed just to stop him from eating. Slowly, Gabriel lowered his gun. His mind raced, calculating the variables. The delivery, the timing. Leo. Leo had brought the box in. Gabriel stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. He looked down at this woman, soft, heavy, completely unarmed, who had just thrown herself between him and a quiet death. He reached out, his long, scarred fingers gently wrapping around her unburned wrist. "Anthony!" Gabriel barked over his shoulder, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. His massive bodyguard immediately appeared in the doorway. "Take a sample from that sink. Send it to the lab. Now. And lock down the penthouse. No one leaves, especially not Leo." As Anthony scrambled to obey, Gabriel looked back at Sophia. The rigid, terrifying Mafia boss softened just a fraction. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and carefully draped it over the burn on her arm. "You burned yourself," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with an emotion he hadn't felt in a decade. "I've survived grease fires, boss," Sophia breathed out, her legs finally trembling. "A little hot broth isn't going to kill me." "No," Gabriel said softly, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "But someone is going to die tonight for making you do that." In that moment, Sophia realized she was no longer just the fat maid who cooked his meals. She had just become the most protected asset in the Costa family, and the only woman Gabriel Costa would ever trust with his life. The lockdown of the Astor Street penthouse was executed with suffocating precision. Steel shutters sealed the floor-to-ceiling windows, and armed enforcers blocked every elevator shaft. Down in the soundproof basement, a room lined with industrial concrete and usually reserved for extracting overdue debts, Leo Martino was strapped to a steel chair. Gabriel stood in the shadows, his tailored jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up to reveal a canvas of dark, sprawling tattoos. He held a pair of heavy brass knuckles, the metal glinting under the single fluorescent bulb. "You broke my heart, Leo," Gabriel whispered, his voice devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "We grew up bleeding on the same streets, and you try to poison me through the one woman who got me eating again?" Leo was breathing hard, a nasty bruise already forming on his cheekbone from Anthony's initial takedown, but there was no guilt in the underboss's eyes, only desperate, wild panic. "I didn't do it, boss. I swear on my mother's grave, on the Holy Mother herself. I didn't touch that box. You think I want you dead? If you fall, the Russians take the south side, and I'm a dead man anyway." "You brought the box in," Gabriel stated coldly, taking a slow step forward. "Because I intercepted it from security," Leo spat, straining against the zip ties. "The only person who touched that package before me was Dr. Aris. He was down in the lobby, getting his pass validated after your morning checkup. He said he inspected the box for biological safety because of your condition." "Check the lobby tapes, Gabriel, please. Check the damn tapes before you blow my brains out." Gabriel froze. The brass knuckles grew heavy in his hand. Dr. Harrison Aris. The pieces of a horrific puzzle suddenly snapped together in Gabriel's sharp mind. The doctor had been the one to diagnose Gabriel with severe, stress-induced anorexia 18 months ago. Aris had prescribed the appetite stimulants that never worked, the anxiety medications that only made Gabriel paranoid, and the specialized dietary supplements that always tasted distinctly bitter. Gabriel's food aversion wasn't purely psychological. He wasn't crazy. He had been suffering from low-dose heavy metal poisoning for over a year. The doctor was deliberately, slowly killing him, creating the illusion of a failing mind and body. The only reason Gabriel had begun to recover was that Sophia had completely bypassed the doctor's prescribed diet, feeding Gabriel pure, untampered, fat-rich foods straight from a local pantry. Sophia hadn't just saved him from the laced broth today. Her heavy, caloric, homemade meals had literally been flushing the toxins out of his failing system for weeks. Realizing his slow kill method was being thwarted by a stubborn, heavy-set maid with a penchant for butter and carbs, Aris had panicked and escalated to an acute, lethal dose in the delivery box. "Anthony," Gabriel barked, turning on his heel. "Pull the lobby footage, now." 10 minutes later, the video confirmed it. Dr. Aris was seen slipping a small syringe into the ventilation hole of the Fulton Market delivery box. Gabriel ordered Leo cut loose. The underboss rubbed his raw wrists, glaring at the floor. Gabriel reached out, gripping the back of Leo's neck in a firm, brotherly embrace. "I owe you blood for doubting you," Gabriel murmured. "But right now, I need you to help me arrange a dinner party." Upstairs, Sophia was sitting at the kitchen island, a bandage wrapped securely around her scalded forearms. She looked up as Gabriel entered. The murderous aura had vanished from his posture, replaced by an intense, magnetic vulnerability. He walked slowly toward her, stopping between her parted knees. Without asking for permission, he buried his face in the soft, warm curve of her large stomach, wrapping his long arms around her thick waist. Sophia gasped softly, her hands instinctively coming up to stroke his dark hair. "It wasn't Leo," Gabriel mumbled against her apron. "It was my doctor. He's been poisoning me for over a year. You're cooking, Sophia. Your beautiful, heavy, honest food. You literally brought me back from the grave." Sophia's hazel eyes filled with tears, her heart aching for the torment he had endured. She held him fiercely, pressing his head into her soft chest. "I've got you, Gabriel. Nobody goes hungry in my kitchen. And nobody gets hurt." He pulled back, his dark eyes tracing the full, round shape of her face, the plushness of her lips, and the unapologetic width of her hips. In a city full of starving, razor-thin socialites and calculating politicians, Sophia was an absolute anchor. Her fatness was a testament to survival, to comfort, and to unapologetic joy. "I need you to cook one more meal for my enemies, Sophia," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly purr. "And then you will never work as a maid again, because you're going to stay right here, by my side, as mine." Sophia felt a heavy flush rise to her cheeks, a fierce thrill echoing in her blood. She smiled, dimples popping. "What's on the menu, boss?" The following evening, the dining room of the Astor Street penthouse was bathed in the warm, ambient glow of a crystal chandelier. The table was set with heavy sterling silver and vintage baccarat crystal. Gabriel sat at the head of the table. To his right sat Dr. Harrison Aris, looking completely composed in a sharp tweed suit. To Gabriel's left sat Alderman James Fitzpatrick, a notoriously corrupt, real-life Chicago political powerhouse whose influence stretched from the Union docks to the judges' chambers. Fitzpatrick was the silent backer behind the Russian syndicate, the man who needed Gabriel dead so he could monopolize the city's port treaties. "I must say, Gabriel, you look remarkably well," Dr. Orris noted, sipping his ice water. "I was worried about your vitals last week. Have you been taking the new supplements?" "I found a new remedy," Gabriel smiled, a chilling, dead-eyed expression that didn't reach his cheekbones. "My new chef. She believes in heavy sustenance." The kitchen doors swung open. Sophia entered, wearing a stunning, custom-tailored black dress that hugged her wide hips, her large breasts, and her thick curves with absolute perfection. Gabriel had ordered it rushed from a local boutique that very morning. She looked nothing like a servant. She looked like an absolute queen, exuding a warm, gravitational pull that commanded the room. She carried a massive silver platter. The aroma of roasted garlic, seared ribeye, and rosemary immediately filled the air. Fitzpatrick laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. "Well, Costa, I see you've upgraded from the tweezers and foam. Nothing like a woman with some meat on her bones to serve a real steak." Gabriel's eyes locked onto Fitzpatrick, his jaw tightening dangerously. "She's not just serving the steak, James. She's the reason I'm still breathing." Sophia set the heavy platter down in the center of the table. She served Fitzpatrick first, placing a beautifully marbled, thick-cut steak on his porcelain plate. Then she served Dr. Orris. Finally, she served Gabriel, letting her soft hand brush intimately against his shoulder before taking a step back to stand directly behind his chair. Dr. Aris picked up his fork, smiling. "It smells divine. Truly." He sliced into the meat, bringing a piece to his mouth. Fitzpatrick followed suit, tearing into the rich, bloody cut with animalistic greed. Gabriel didn't touch his utensils. He leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of Barolo wine. You know, Harrison, Sophia has an incredibly refined palate. Yesterday she tasted something quite unique in my kitchen, a distinct flavor of bitter almonds and battery acid. Dr. Aris stopped chewing. The color instantly drained from his face, leaving him chalk white. Fitzpatrick paused, glancing between the doctor and the Mafia boss, his political instincts suddenly screaming that the room had grown too quiet. I don't know what you mean, Gabriel, Dr. Orris stammered, his eyes darting toward the penthouse doors. Anthony and Leo were standing there, their arms crossed, heavily armed and completely blocking the exit. I think you do, Gabriel whispered. He tossed a thick, folded manila folder onto the center of the table. The lab report. Thallium. A coward's weapon. Dosed slowly over 18 months to make me look weak, to make me look crazy. So James here could swoop in and negotiate the port treaty over my dead body. Fitzpatrick dropped his fork, a nervous sweat breaking out on his bald head. Gabriel, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. I am a city alderman. If you touch me, the federal heat on the Costa family will burn your empire to the ground. Gabriel finally took a sip of his wine. You're an alderman, James, but I am the king of this city, and you insulted my queen in her own dining room. Gabriel gave a subtle nod. Leo moved with terrifying speed. He stepped behind Dr. Orris, wrapping a piano wire tight around the doctor's throat. Aris gagged, his hands clawing uselessly at the wire as his chair tipped backward, crashing onto the Brazilian hardwood. At the same time, Anthony stepped up to Fitzpatrick, pressing the cold, suppressed barrel of a Glock 19 directly against the politician's temple. You're going to resign tomorrow, James, Gabriel said smoothly, watching the alderman tremble. You're going to cite health reasons. You're going to hand the port contracts exclusively to the Costa holding companies. If you ever say the name Sophia or look in her direction again, I won't use a gun. I will let Leo use the wire. Fitzpatrick, pale and shaking, nodded frantically. Yes, whatever you want, Costa. Just let me live. Get him out of my sight, Gabriel ordered in disgust, and clean up the trash on the floor. Within minutes, the dining room was completely emptied of the traitors. The body of the doctor was dragged away to be dealt with, and the corrupt alderman was escorted out, thoroughly broken. The penthouse fell completely silent, save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Gabriel stood up from the table. He turned to Sophia, who had watched the entire brutal display without flinching. She knew exactly who he was when she saved him. She wasn't going to shy away from his darkness now. Gabriel walked toward her, picking her up seamlessly despite her heavy frame. He carried her away from the cold dining room and into the warm, fragrant sanctuary of the kitchen. He set her gently onto the edge of the granite island. He stepped between her thick thighs, his hands gripping her wide, soft hips with absolute reverence. You fed me when I was dying, he murmured, pressing his lips passionately against her neck, breathing in the scent of vanilla and roasted garlic that clung to her skin. You took my poison. You took my darkness. I'll always feed you, Gabriel, Sophia breathed heavily, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer to her plush chest. But you're going to have to eat all of it. Every last bite, he promised, his mouth capturing hers in a bruising, desperate kiss. Gabriel Costa had once starved in a golden cage, terrified of his own shadow. But as he held the heavy, beautiful woman who had marched into his kitchen and demanded he live, he knew he would never go hungry again. The Mafia boss had found his ultimate strength, not in fear, but in the soft, unapologetic embrace of his new queen. Did Gabriel and Sophia's intense journey leave you breathless? This story proves that true strength and beauty come in all shapes, and sometimes the most unexpected heroes wear a chef's apron instead of armor. If you loved this dramatic mafia romance and want more thrilling, twist-filled stories that break the mold, smash that like button right now. Share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more epic real-life storytelling.